On this conversation, we will hear about the food system transformation in the UK. I'm Ana Vavra, and along with my colleague, Ana Pires da Silva from INIAF, Portugal, I'm pleased to moderate this conversation. I represent the Austrian Agency for Health and Food Safety, 𝐼HSS, and my 𝐼HSS colleagues, Mia Gucciari, will be writing a summary of the conversation, and my colleague Katrin Buchinger will be handling the technical aspect. So in case you have any technical issues during the conversation, you can write her in the chat. Agroecology, the European Partnership on Accelerating Farming System Transition, Agroecology Living Labs and Research Infrastructures, is a collaborative research and innovation initiative involving the European Commission and 26 member states, associated countries and third countries, with a total of 72 partners. These conversations on agroecology are among the initial steps to enhance agricultural knowledge and innovation systems, the so-called ACIS, for the agroecological transition. These conversations aim to foster connections between living labs and research infrastructures actors throughout Europe. And these monthly online discussions will continue throughout the 7-year partnership, promoting the engagement and networking of agroecology stakeholders across Europe. And today we are very pleased to have 2 presentations. The first one is by Matt Gibson, USA, from Cornell University. He will present the mapping of priorities for food system transformation among alternative actors in the UK. And our second presentation is given by Ulrich Schmutz from Coventry University, UK. And he will give us some insights into sharing knowledge and skills to improve local connections at the Coventry Agricultural Living Lab. After the 2 talks, you will have the opportunity to join our discussion. And before we begin, I will guide you through the conversation play rules. So to ensure a good technical quality, we ask you to keep your microphones muted when you're not speaking and your cameras closed in case your connection is not so good. Feel free to join the conversation by speaking up or using the chat. We respect everyone's opinions and keep our questions short and simple. Comments and ideas are very important and welcome in this conversation. The conversation is recorded, so if anyone has objections, please let us know right now. And if there are no objections, then we can start with the conversation and with our first presenter, Matt Gibson. The floor is yours, Matt.
Thank you very much, Anna. It's great to be here today. Hoping everyone can see my screen. Give me a nod if you can. Great, perfect. So in the next sort of 10 or 12 minutes or so, I'm going to give you a very quick run through of a study we did that was published last year on assessing priorities for food systems transformation among UK alternative actors. And so a very, very quick bio. I'm currently a postdoctoral associate at Cornell, where I work on food systems transformation and the upcoming launch of the 𝐷 𝐸 report. I thought I'd give that a quick plug because that's being launched next week in Stockholm and it may be of interest to some of the audience here. And in a couple of months, I'll be moving over to a fellowship where I'll be focusing on sort of, post-growth food systems and commercial determinants of health. Again, maybe of interest to some of the agroecology folk. So the study, what we did was map and then survey, 1,400 alternative food system actors across the UK. And from that, we asked them kind of a main question of what is your priority for food systems transformation? And with those text responses, we did a kind of a thematic analysis of some of those priorities and then compared them to what we see commonly in food systems reports or government papers and kind of trying to see where the commonalities and some of the differences were. I'm not going to go into too much detail about this because we've only got a few minutes. Um, but essentially, the UK is a really interesting production landscape in that quite a lot of the landscape is farmed. It's very, very visible. Kind of organic production, ranges from 1 to 9% depending on where you are. And from a dietary perspective, you can just kind of look at the blue bit there, which is kind of the processed meats. Maybe in England, it's about what, 450, 500 grams of processed meat per week. And so, from a dietary perspective, the nation's diets are fairly poor. So, this kind of production landscape and the diets makes the UK quite an interesting place to kind of survey priorities for change. Um, Very, very, very briefly, I would probably be asking myself, what does alternative mean if I was listening to me talk? So the definition that we use, alternative food system, from Cleveland et al. And the real difference here that we adopt is this, differentiated from the mainstream. If you look on the top right of the slide, by the extent to which they consider social and ecological outcomes over economic profit. So that was a kind of guiding principle to try and identify some of these participants or prospective participants in this survey. And in terms of who responded, if again you look at this tree map on the top right, this figure B, a good deal of those were from sort of unconventional farmers, among them agroecology. CSO there means civil society organizations, but also a good deal of grassroots, community-based, and activists as well. So kind of a real cross-section of what you'd consider the alternative food system space within the UK. And also from like a geographic perspective, a fairly good coverage of the country. You'll see that London, this yellow region here, is a lot higher than the rest, mostly because a lot of the civil society organizations have their headquarters based in London. But a good deal from the southwest as well. And if we do go back to that slide in a bit, there's quite a lot of alternative food production that goes on in the southwest, and so that's where we kind of see a good deal of responses from there as well. In terms of the results, this is the interesting bit. So the top left table here is explicit responses from all of these participants on what they think their priorities for food systems transformation was. And so I'll just pick out a couple. As much food as possible is grown and consumed locally. Very applicable to this conversation. Support a transition to agroecological farming systems in the UK. And so we had almost 1,200 of these short texts to try and make sense of. Again, I do have method slides, but I think it's better to focus on the results here. But what we did was try and thematically group them into sort of what we call parent themes, which are on the right-hand side here. And then we did a bit more of an in-depth mapping to try and understand, are there particular things that stand out even within those kind of themes? And so the way that we did this firstly was to use what you would call kind of a content analysis approach, using Python, which basically you put all this text in and then an algorithm tells you what are the kind of themes. It's a bit more complicated than that, but in essence, that's what it is. So if you look at the bottom left table, these are the top 10 key words that then we mapped onto these parent themes. I hope that makes sense. So for example, farming, agroecological practice system support, organic, regenerative production. This was a theme all around production, all around changing production onto a more sustainable footing. And we see actually that the production theme and what we call the distribution and scale theme, i.e., should it be small scale? Should it be local? Should it be community based? What do the supply chains look like? These were really the top two themes that came out of this mapping exercise. And hopefully that'll make a bit more sense when I show you this slide. So, as I said, we have parent themes, but then also we have things that we refer to as child themes, as in within each of these big themes, there's mini themes. Okay, so the single most common priority that we encountered was for some kind of change, switch, adoption of agroecological, organic, and regenerative production. And I know that those things all mean different things to different people, and some people may disagree with lumping them all in one. We do have the data that splits them out. I can't remember what that is off the top of my head, but we do have that data. But the shift to sustainable production and the localizing of food systems were by far and away the two most frequent priorities that we identified from all of these people that responded to our survey. And also, we got some really interesting ones around obviously dietary change, but kind of addressing power imbalances, land access, yeah, really kind of across kind of a spectrum from what you might consider more moderate to you might consider more radical changes. And in terms of what we didn't really see, because it's also quite interesting as well to look at what didn't show up or what showed up less than average. If you look to the bottom of this, we kind of um, see priorities around kind of technology or kind of more of the really kind of process-based changes. So packaging, procurement, technology and innovation. And so we see those far less often than kind of the big picture changes. And so what I find really interesting, and I'll show you a couple of slides in a minute, is how that actually compares to kind of what you might consider the mainstream in the UK, which I don't think will be any surprise, is a lot more focused on technology and innovation and productivity than alternative actors are. But alternative actors are not one homogeneous group. They all have different views. And so if you look at this figure, hopefully it'll make sense after I talk through it a little bit. I apologize, it's not super big, but if you look at the top, along the top, we have CSOs, so the civil society folks. Farm means the farming. Community, so that's grassroots or garden, kind of community gardens. The activists, researchers, grow or growers, which self-identified differently than farming in the sense that these kind of are a bit more on a collective market gardening basis than a purely commercial farmer. And
Two more minutes, Matt. Sorry.
Two or 1 minute?
Yes, 2 more minutes.
Perfect, great. And pub means kind of the public sector. And so I'll very, very briefly on this, I'll just pick out one of them in that if you look at the third one, so reduce animal source consumption, essentially that's eat less meat. Red means that CSOs were a lot more in favor than the whole group. And you can't really even see farm because it's so small. And not surprisingly, farmers and growers were not as pro that priority because a lot of farmers and growers rear and grow livestock, right? So this just it illustrates that there are different priorities and some of them are in tension with one another depending on who the actor is. Super quickly, the UK had this big national food strategy a few years ago. It can be seen as kind of the mainstream food systems report for the UK. The folks in red, the trade bodies, were broadly in favor. The civil society folks were not, but it's interesting to compare that. I'm going to skip that bit. So if we just look on the left-hand side, this big report was called the Dimbleby report. And so in this top box, we found that there were priorities in this group of people, these alternative actors, that did not feature whatsoever in this mainstream report. So focus on addressing power imbalances, localizing food systems, reform, justice, and actually any kind of real dietary change did not feature in this mainstream report. However, features in this report that did not feature in the priority surveys were this idea of increasing imports and exports, kind of a very much kind of a globalized food system kind of approach. And that's really kind of interesting because, you know, the stuff that makes it into these mainstream reports is by all intents kind of the policy intent of the particular government of the time. And so we see a really kind of a difference there between these alternative groups and the mainstream. And finally, this is kind of a summary of the 15 actions, the 15 most common actions that we found. And we've tried to kind of separate them out into where they might act on the system, right? So structural, the fundamental changes to the food system. Systemic, can we try and join up the dots a bit better? And what we call enabling is actually, can we lift people up to kind of give them agency to create their own kind of change? And I think I'm almost out of time, but I do just want to say there are a few follow-ups that we're doing. So we're repeating this kind of survey twice more. One with the global researchers in food systems, and we've got about 3,000 responses to that. And also we're looking at a cross-country analysis of the US and the UK, and that's with alternative and also mainstream or conventional actors. And those are both in progress right now, and hopefully kind of a couple of papers out in the next few months / sometime in 2026. I think I'm just about out of time, so thank you very much and happy to join the discussion later. Thanks.
Thank you, Matt, for the really interesting talk. Do we have any questions from the audience? We have maybe time for one question.
Yeah. There's no questions in the chat, but are there any questions from the audience? I just have a minor remark. Matt, can I just ask you, as far as I understood, you had very few responses for consumers. I'm not sure if I'm right, but you are supposed to have a balanced number of responses per group, I think. So how can you overcome this situation?
It's a really great question and a really great observation. So yeah, we actually did not have a specific consumer group sector that we focused on. Some of the civil society organizations were consumer representing groups, if that makes sense. And so kind of lobbying on the issues on behalf of consumers, but we did not have a sample of individual consumers that were part of it. And it's really hard to kind of get a representative sample because, you know, everyone's a food system actor, right, in some degree or another. So we basically try to be a bit pragmatic about it and look towards the networks and the representing bodies rather than individuals in kind of a specific sense. I hope that makes sense.
Okay, thank you. But I can see one hand up. We don't have much time, but Lopa?
Yeah, well, I can always wait for the conversation to happen after the presentation if you don't have time. Or shall I just go ahead? Just wanted to say, Matt, very interesting findings and definitely a lot of relevance to what steps we take further in terms of changes in policy and practice. So the really relevant findings. Just a quick question. I know you have distinguished between mainstream and alternative actors. The point is, in reality, many of the food system actors are actually in both the systems to some extent or the other. So how have you taken that into account in the study? Because you don't have to separate, for example, many of them are engaged in both to some extent. So how has that been resolved in the findings? Because clearly, you know, we don't have them very distinct boundaries between them. That's one question. Maybe we can take it up later if we have less time now.
That is a great question. If we have time now, I can give a bit of answer, or I can hold it and we can wait for the discussion.
Maybe we hold it and wait for the discussion because we're a bit late already. But thank you for the questions. And now we're really curious to hear about the Coventry Agroecological Living Lab from Ulrich. Thank you.
Can you hear me? Yeah.
Yes.
Interesting. Yes. And because I use my phone, I'll ask you to move on the slide. So my name is Ulrich Schmutz. I'm a professor at Coventry University on the subject of organic horticulture. I've done my whole career on that, and also ecological economics. I'm an agricultural economist in this way. The presentation is together with Judith Conroy. She cannot be here, but she has done a lot of work on this agroecological living lab, and also with Lopa, who is here next with me, who is not in the presentation, but has also a link to it on the social supermarkets. Dr. Lopa Saxena, that's the proper name. So in terms of introducing, so we want to show you like a bottom up, and maybe to my name, I'm born in Germany, but I've lived here in the UK for 20 years, and I have a German and a British passport. So next slide, please. So I want to show you the bottom up of this place. So here we are. This is Coventry. It's really right in the middle of England, and it is has a very diverse population, 0.3 million, and it's part of a bigger area, 3 million. That's almost the size of a European country like Lithuania. So we have very many allotments. However, what's very characteristic for our area is that 1 in 5 people are below the poverty line, and we have a high average percentage of children eligible, for example, for school meal. So we are not a really rich area, and we are not in the center of Britain in terms of like everything is concentrated on London. We are a very centralistic country. So we are kind of in the middle of it, and that makes it also interesting. Next slide, please. So what we did on a bottom up, if you go for the next one, bottom up approach of key participants. One of them is Feeding Coventry. I don't go through them all, but they also run this social supermarket. And I said why that's important, because of our population. Our university is there. We are based here as well. We have a 5-acre community farm. So basically the creation of this living lab, agroecological living lab, is based from the bottom up, from the actors we have, and we combined them all. Next one. So it was established in 2023 as part of an agriculture project called Agroecology for Europe, which actually has prepared this partnership. So I'm quite involved in this partnership as well, and we are actually leading new work package on it as well, just as a side effect. So this is an urban living lab, so it's very small scale, very local, but we also want to phase it out to a metropolitan area, the one I showed you earlier with the 3 million. So once we have established it on one kind of fairly weak city, we can do it with other weak cities or difficult cities, and then we become stronger. If weak people bond together, we will have strengths in it. Next one. The methods we do, is we did workshops. We engaged with people in that way, and one of the themes identified bottom up was the diversity of crops preparing for climate change, so this is one of the things. Next one, please. So also in this first workshop, I just show you the approach a bit. So we asked, what are other important areas, more available local food growing spaces. So a lot of the things we heard in the previous discussion came up here as well. And then we had another workshop. If we go on to second one, next slide, just to see. So in this one, focus then a little bit more, how can we work on these different diverse plants? We have a heritage seed library to increase the production of vegetables, also to have more, let's say, exotic, or some people call it Asian vegetables, because our population is very diverse. So we don't need to eat just the vegetables which have been traditionally grown in Europe. So that's very interesting. And we also tried, and this is the slide here, to extend the season. So you have basically more vegetables, and we used a lot of greenhouses as well. So to really improve that. Next slide, please. Here you see that. We also discussed, just jump on one, that the accreditation of ENNO, this is a European network of living labs, but we felt in this group, first of all, it is too they're too complicated. We are not against ENNO, but it's too complicated, and that step, it wasn't really necessary. So we just continued to be an agroecological living lab. And then we also designed crop trials, how we can improve and learn how to grow more crops. If you go for the next one. So again, I'll show you a bit more the three things participant would like to change. So there were a lot of different subjects, and like in the previous presentation, a lot was about production, agroecological production. So we also have some challenges, time constraints. This is an issue. Next one, if you go for the next one on challenges. Yeah, let's see. Next slide, please. Is on challenges, yes, and conflicting priorities. Communication can be slow, so it's always an issue to bring everyone together and keep the momentum. And ideally, we wanted also to install momentum less from our universities and just from the actors, but we are still struggling with that. But you know, it goes on, and we have a new project and find new projects to do additional funding. So if I come to the conclusion, so the outcomes are we have involved a diverse range of participants and smaller individual ventures between certain organizations. They came together. So we created this living lab of activities where weak people come together and become stronger. We created an online space. We also engaged with a national charity on organic gardening, Garden Organic. And we have identified changes that can be made to organizational and physical practices. So we actually know what to do, and we engaged with the local authority, the Coventry City Council, and also planning to engage, as I said earlier, with this bigger area, which is a new thing which we have in the United Kingdom, that we have bigger metropolitan areas which will have more independence. And ideally then, you know, the idea is that it will help us to find more growing spaces, create more local production, in that case in a metropolitan area. And also, so to go to the academic part now, next one, there's 5 slides on the academic, so I think I can go through all of them. So here you find the link. We wrote a paper, and this paper is together with the other partners in the agroecological living lab, and it combines 2 other living labs. So I think it's always very good in order to understand yourself, compare yourself with someone else, and then you really understand your strengths and weaknesses. So this is the paper. Next one. If this slide will show you the 2 other living labs. So we had these local ones, I talked about that. We have a national living lab in the Netherlands in this paper. And then we have a regional one. So the national one is the whole of the Netherlands with Zukunftsboeren. So it's not such a big country, the Netherlands. So a living lab on that level. And another agroecological living lab is regional. And this is in Val d'Aosta in the Piedmont area of Italy. And so this is the graphical abstract of it. And so we try to write an approach how we can measure the impact for agroecological transition in those living labs against the 13 criteria through agroecological principles like recycling, input substitution, animal health, biodiversity. And I just wanted to show you a few more slides on that in terms of results. So if we go for the next one. So this one are enabling factors for the creation of the 3 𝐷s. We call them agroecological living labs. So we defined the word. We didn't say just living labs. We wanted agroecological living labs. We're trying to coin that a little bit, also to make it separate to ENNO, not to be not to be in competition to them, but just to say what is the specific agroecological focus, because animal living labs are just general living labs often, and we are more agroecological. So we have those three criteria: the national Dutch living lab, the regional Italian, and our urban one. And so we see that enabling factors like trigger events or external pressures have been there in all of them. If we go maybe to the line access to funding and economic issues, we don't have that so much. So also in the regional one as well. So the national living lab in that case had easier access to funding. I think we haven't really, ideally we would want to have support from the government, it's from the local council of Coventry, but we don't have that at the moment because there's not so much money there. I said earlier, they're a bit weak. And also on the point of infrastructure, if you look down here on that analysis, so infrastructure was always more available on the national living labs and the regional one, and less so in our one. We have some infrastructure, but in order to really grow and to make it into higher scale, we would need maybe a disused warehouse. We need maybe more growing spaces. So that to kind of extend that further.
Ulrich, please
you
finish
said
in a
I
minute.
have no more time.
Yeah, sorry. Yes.
I think should be all
One
right.
more minute. Yes.
Because then we can go for the last two slides. But I think according to my time, I'm already nearly finished. So it's two more slides of results. And obviously, I would recommend you, if you're interested, to download this paper. Is open access. As I said earlier, it's in agroecological and sustainable food systems. And the title of the paper was entry, I haven't said that, an entry point for transition towards sustainable living labs. And the key thing is also to provide a novel framework for the evaluation of those living labs at the different scale. So let's look at table 4 here, just another snapshot. So here again, we used approaches for the creation, or supporting dialogue and co-creation and decision-making. And again, here you can see that the approaches for creation of agroecological living labs were the same. So there's quite a lot of similarity. But for example, preliminary survey to identified needs, we didn't do that, mainly in our case because we already knew the actors, and our actors are small. And also you see then different approaches. We had, for example, field visits, others had theater play. Great, that gives you almost ideas. There's nothing bad or wrong in terms of what to do, but we felt that the field visits, site visits, also through the social supermarkets and the activities there, really gave a better understanding where people are, and then build it up from there. Once you visited someone else's site, you really can much better connect to where they are and how they can develop further. And the final slide is 5 academic results. And this is a bit small, but we try to discuss the connection between scales evaluated and impacts in different dimensions and their statistical significance. And there we found that the political dimension was more significant in all cases, both for action and learning, while the other ones were not significant. I wouldn't overrate those results too much because it's an academic paper. You want to add some statistic and use your data for that, but it's because also our sample in some case was a little bit small, but still we found significant differences and tried to entangle this thing what we've seen with Matt's presentation, also to see how that works out. And the final slide is Thank you. Yeah, that's the one. So it's a work which is done a lot by Judith Conroy, but also with our whole center, myself and Lopa and other people who worked in it. So thank you. And I think I should be in time, but okay.
Thank you, Ulrich. I think we have time for one question before we head into the discussion round. Do we have one question from the audience?
Okay, there are a question in the chat, but maybe we can wait for the discussion.
Yeah.
Yes. Then we can maybe just head into the overall discussion. And Anna will read the chat questions.
So we have one question, and first of it, we have someone is asking for the link to the publication mentioned by Ulrich. But then someone shared a link, but it's not sure if it's the right one. So maybe Ulrich can take a look and check that. But besides this, we have a question. Yes, Ulrich, are the use of agroplastics that we can see in some photos and the avoidance of microplastics topics for the transition to sustainable food systems?
Yes. They are, and we have done also work on them. Maybe it's
Oh, sorry, you're muted.
Yeah.
There. Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. So yeah, that's okay then. So the answer is yes, we have done that, but we have not. It didn't come up in the work in the workshops as a priority. So I have led a previous project. It's called Organic Plus, and that was on the use of plastic mulching in horticulture. So we have developed quite a lot of work in terms of reducing plastic as an input in horticulture, because we see it or agriculture, we see it very much as a contentious input. I think it's definitely replaceable, and also we have even done trials with some of the farms, replaceable as a mulching material, because then it can easily get into the soil. It's not replaceable at the moment in terms of the plastic polytunnels we have, because the alternative would be glass, and that's also very expensive. So we work in terms of horticulture quite often with these polytunnels, which are unheated structures, but they give you, first of all, they take the rain out, which is sometimes useful, but we don't have so much rain in our climate anyway. So in this part of the UK, people always underestimate that. But they extend the season. So that's really very important for us, that we can continue growing, because our climate we have really not snow in the winter anymore, so we can grow a lot of winter vegetables, and there's quite an interesting other area. There's a book on it as well, so that's very interesting for us as well, including also fruit. We can have a second season of raspberries, so I can go out in my garden and harvest some fruit now still and continue to do. Okay, that's maybe
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Now, are there any questions? Any more questions?
Other
Okay,
questions?
we have one more. Is there any info regarding how large the farms were or the level of technical support they had, agronomists and so on?
No. Okay.
I can hear.
Do you want to say it again?
Oh, excuse me. Is there any info regarding how large the farms were or the level of technical support they had, like
Yes.
agronomists and so on?
Yeah. Okay. So our farms are relatively small. So usually horticultural farms can be between 5 and 10 hectares, which is kind of normal. And the technical support is difficult because these farms are often too small. We don't have an advisory system anymore, so the advisory system is private. So basically, you have to pay some expert to come to your farm, and that is usually only viable if you are a very large farm or if you plant a new agroforestry scheme on a large bit. So on that level, it's better to have this living lab where you have a combination of knowledge in this living lab. So basically, it's peer-to-peer learning. So you learn from other participants, but not really from the agronomist. And I think that's what I tried to say also earlier. But if we people come together and also with less knowledge, there's a lot of knowledge online, in terms of growing. So that's how the knowledge is transferred. We also have a UK-wide organizations called OGA, Organic Growers Alliance, which has all the agricultural knowledge specifically for horticulture. I'm also in another one, because another area of my work is on trees. So fruit trees is interesting, but also on agroforestry. And we have a network. Again, we are trying to establish that. We have an agroforestry open weekend, and we had 2 agroforestry shows now. The last one was just recently. So again, this knowledge of agroforestry, which trees to grow, when, how to harvest them, this is how we create the knowledge in those conferences and meetings, but it's not with the advisors. Yeah.
Thank you very much. We still have a question from Lopa regarding the presentation given by Matt Gibson. Maybe you can, we don't have any more questions in the chat so far, so maybe you can answer again, please. Go ahead.
Sure. Yeah. Just so I understand the question, right? We're talking about, the alternatives kind of exist on a bit of a spectrum, right? And how did we kind of assess that? Because some may be fairly close to mainstream and some may be completely radical. The short answer is we didn't do it explicitly. So of each one of these folks that we mapped, 1,422, we did not explicitly record where we felt they might be on this spectrum of conventional to alternative. But we tried to do it through how their responses in terms of different buckets of these actors, how they compared to kind of known and stated mainstream priorities for food systems transformation. And there's a couple of really great papers that I'll post in the chat. This one by O'Neill, situating the alternative within the conventional, and that's from Yorkshire. That's a kind of an experience from Yorkshire, which is a really interesting paper. And there's another paper that I'll try and find super quickly and post it after I've finished, that talks about how narratives are formed from the periphery, and then how do they interact with narratives from the mainstream, and et cetera. But I'd say a quick follow-up to that is the follow-up study that we're doing with the US and the UK. We are expanding that to alternative and conventional. It's a lot harder to get conventional food systems actors to respond to a survey because if you're Nestle or Coca-Cola, you're probably not going to be responding to a request for a survey from a reasonably out there academic. So that's one thing to note. But yeah, we are trying to see if there are any differences that we can kind of tease out in this follow-up study that we're doing. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you. Well, there's no. Thank you for sharing the document, Matt. And there are no more questions. in the chat? I don't know if so. Okay, we have Alexandra.
Yeah, thank you
Go ahead.
for the nice talks. And I have a question to Matt Gibson regarding like the priority topics, because I had the impression that, for example, agroecological or organic production is a quite overarching concept. So the category is quite often used. And then you have like topics like soil health or healthy food, which I would see as part of such concepts like organic agriculture. So is there maybe a overlap, or yeah, the shoes of the categories is too small or too big? Because the topics at the bottom, they're also important, I would say, and maybe they are part of the overarching concepts.
Thanks. That's a great question again, and it's something that we did kind of debate quite a lot, right? So these are texts. So these were open-ended questions that participants then put in their own answers. You know, another way of doing it would have been to kind of pre-fill the survey with a list of 20, 30 priorities that then folks could select to get maybe more of a cleaner way of doing it. The way that we did it was any explicit mention of agroecology or say kind of organic production or regenerative. I know those things mean different to the folks on this chat. We group those together. So that's not to say that healthy diets are not part of that, but it was the explicit reference in the text responses that we grouped it by. And so yeah, I think you're right. You could argue that you could collapse some of these into one or another, or you could argue that you could pull them out and separate them. It would be interesting to separate the organic folk from the agroecological folk from the regenerative folk and kind of see where that kind of stacks up. But yeah, in terms of our method, it was based on the explicit way that participants actually recorded their answers.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, we still have time for some questions. Okay, Johannes.
Thank you for the interesting talk. I have a question for Ulrich Schmutz, which I try to keep it to the essence. We are right now starting to create a living lab in South Tyrol, in the north of Italy, and there are many questions popping up. So I wanted to know if there is either some literature or let's say guidelines, what things would be super important to know before creating or before starting an agroecological living lab, as we would do it, because we are part of the Agrico Forecast project, which is part of the agroecology partnership.
You're muted.
Ulrich, we can hear you.
Hello, can you hear me now?
Hello. Yes, perfect.
Now we can hear me. Yeah, okay. So yes, so Johannes, I see that is a very good idea. I was teaching in South Tyrol in Bozen, organic farming. I think this paper I gave you is interesting. You know, obviously that's our paper, but I think there are other papers as well. But my overall advice would be really follow our methodology in terms of talk to the actors, you know, see what the need is. You know, I know South Tyrol quite well. It depends. You can go for a more urban one. You could also go more for this Valveraita thing that's actually not very far away, because there also it was tourism and so the problems are always different. So you need to really develop, get everyone together and then build a theory of change. Do we want to, for example, Valveraita, there was the issue that people leave the land. That's not the issue in Coventry. We have too many people coming here. But we need to produce. So you need to really do that. And then I would say map it against the agroecological principles in the FAO, but also the 13th one, the Nihilini Declaration, so that it is really based on real transition, because a lot of the activities, I wouldn't say it's fake agroecology, but I think one has to be really careful that there is also agroecological change and not just a living lab to develop something. And the other thing is also the experimentation. So we try to do also trials, so empower people to grow their own food. We haven't done processing. I think we would like to get into that more, and we have further ideas also to get it to scale. And that's maybe the final thing I would want to say. In the new agroecology partnership, we are looking also at living labs at a higher scale, which then includes the processing, the more continuous supply over the year, and also the inclusion of local restaurants, catering, schools, so that you have a level of procurement based on the agroecological production in your area. Yeah, so. And don't export so much. I know South Tyrol exports a lot of apples, but that's not agroecology. You have to work on that home production. Hope this helps. Is that all right?
Thank you very much.
You can say get in touch with you or something.
Yeah, you can of course get in touch with us, of course. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, thank you. That would be great. Yeah.
Okay, we don't have any more questions in the chat.
I mean, I would say we would still have time for one more question from the audience or chat, if there's something that you still would like to know from the two presenters.
Maybe I have a question for.
Yes.
Yeah, for Matt, I think that was very, very interesting. Your work. I just wanted you to, on the last one, I did just wanted a bit more detail. So you mentioned the Dimbleby report, and do you have any help how some of this, you said there's a big divide between the alternative ideas and the standard reports, if I call them like that. How can we get more? How can the alternative ideas become more mainstream without kind of selling out to this more mainstream ideas? Do you have any ideas or advice or reflections on that?
That's a really hard question for for a 30-second answer. Yeah, it's the question, isn't it? I think in the UK, one thing that I know you said, we're one of the most centralized countries in Europe, and we are, but there are sort of food policy is devolved at the national level. So England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland have some grasp over their own food policy. And I know that this current Labour government is putting out feelers in terms of further devolving sort of some powers to the local level. And so the UK has a really active sort of local food partnership scene, the sustainable food places. And so from my perspective, strengthening the local government powers to actually, do their own planning, do their own local procurement, right? I think some of those answers, because the way that centralized Westminster works, it's you're looking at the kind of time frames that may not produce the answers and the solutions that we need. So yeah, my response really would be, further devolution of policy and powers to the folks that are really on the ground, really. Yeah.
Yeah, and that may also be a lesson for the European Union. I don't know.
Yeah,
I think that is
perhaps.
Well, we have one last question in the chat for Matt, I think. For the first study, how should you interpret exactly this motivation, agroecological, organic, and regenerative production? Is it a matter of people aligning with the principles, or was the underlying motivation also studied?
Yeah, really great question again. In an ideal world, we would have done like a follow-up, maybe like a follow-up workshop or semi-structured interviews with some of the participants just to kind of tease out their intention. Because these responses were maybe between 30 and 50 words. So to try and convey or to try and kind of get the motivations behind that was fairly challenging. And so obviously there's a physical and there's a practical association with agroecology, but then there's a socioeconomic, political, cultural aspect as well. Some responses were kind of explicit on that, but many were as simple as we need a shift to agroecological production. And so it's challenging to tease out the ones that were speaking more about fundamental system change, of which I think agroecology is kind of speaking to, versus the ones that were more focused on the practicalities of agroecology. So yeah, in essence, it was challenging to try and tease that out. Yeah.
Thank you so much. I think we need to do a wrap up now. Thank you for your active participation in the discussion. A big thank you, of course, to our speakers, Matt and Ulrich. A thank you to the whole Task 7.1 group for planning the event, to the 𝐼𝐺𝑠 team for organizing it, and for all of you in the audience for listening and being here and discussing. The next conversation will be on the 29th of October. So if you have any ideas for topics for coming up conversations, or if you have colleagues that would like to join the email list, please don't hesitate to contact any of us. We are looking forward to seeing you in October. And yeah, thank you so much.